Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Today we are launching into an environment that is just defined by uncertainty, by adrenaline, and by rapidly escalating stakes. We're talking about professional drone operations in a flood response.
And floods are really the ultimate high change, high distraction environment. I mean, the ground is literally dissolving under your feet. Priorities are shifting by the minute. And the air is just filled with things, aircraft, volunteers, hazards that, they didn't even exist an hour ago. It is chaos management, pure and simple.
Absolutely. And our listeners shared a really comprehensive stack of sources with us. We've got operational guides, regulatory analyses from both Transport Canada and the FAA, and some internal mission debriefs. And they all focus on this sharp difference, this bright line between someone who just owns a drone and someone who runs a high-consequence drone operation in a disaster. It's so easy to mistake activity for real accomplishment out there.
Right. And that makes our mission for this deep dive absolutely vital. We need to dissect the operational, the structural, and the regulatory standards that are the difference between a safe, effective mission and one that, frankly, becomes the second emergency of the day. We are distilling these complex binders full of procedures into decision-grade knowledge for you, the professional operator.
And here's the core paradox that every single one of these serious resources underlines. The drone, the technology itself, that's easy.
Oh, yeah. Anyone can launch a quadcopter these days.
Exactly. But the operation, managing the human risk, navigating that chaotic environment, the regulations, and critically managing the data flow, that is immensely hard. Our goal today is to focus relentlessly on making you the expert level operator who can manage that hard part.
Because if you approach a flood mission with the mentality that, the tech will save me or I can just figure it out as I go, you will very, very quickly go from being a critical resource to becoming a new hazard, a hazard that incident command has to divert resources to manage. We have to make sure your success doesn't depend on luck, but on rigid professional discipline.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's get right into it. When we talk about hazard mitigation in let's say, a regular mapping environment, we use a static checklist, right? Check for power lines, check for fences, check for trees, you're done. But the sources, they all highlight that in a flood response, hazards are a living list.
That's the perfect term for it, a living list. That concept is so essential because it actively fights complacency. The river cresting or the wind suddenly funneling through a new gap between buildings. It means the hazard profile changes not just daily, but every 15 minutes. It demands continuous hazard ownership by every single person on the crew. And at the absolute top of that living list sits the single most dangerous and career-ending threat.
This is critical, and the source material really doesn't mince words. They label collision with manned aircraft as the #1 mission killer. We're talking about helicopters, rescue, police, news, utility, medevac, all flying low, fast, and often changing their flight vectors with absolutely no warning because their focus is entirely on the emergency below them.
And the threat profile is severe for a few reasons. First, these are not, recreational flights. These are life-saving operations. They're moving injured people, critical supplies. A conflict with your drone, even a near miss that forces a pilot to react suddenly, can shut down all life-saving air operations in that sector immediately. When you force a police helicopter to land prematurely, you've moved way beyond a minor incident. That's a massive public safety failure. This is why airspace integrity is the non-negotiable prime directive.
And the environment itself, it actually works against the drone team, doesn't it? What are some of those subtle watchouts that make the pilot's job so much harder?
Well, the most insidious one is sensory masking. So many pilots operate under this false assumption, well, I don't hear or see any aircraft, so the sky must be clear. But you have high winds, you have the constant, powerful noise of rushing water, sometimes heavy rain. All of that masks the sound of an approaching aircraft. And to compound that, the pilot's focus is naturally drawn downward, right, toward the water to the mission objective. The stranded house, the washed out road. Their eyes are not scanning the sky. And that's precisely when the danger appears.
Okay, so if the environment is masking the sound and the mission itself is drawing the pilot's eye down, what are the non-negotiable essential mitigations? How do you build a rigorous defense against this threat?
It has to start with a structural separation of duties. That's rule one. You need a dedicated visual observer, or VO, who is assigned solely as airspace watch. This person is not multitasking. They're not also filming. They're not on the phone to incident command. They are not managing batteries. Their job, their only job, is 360-degree surveillance of the sky and the immediate operational area. They are the human radar.
And the communication protocol, that has to be just as rigorous, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. That's the second piece. You must pre-brief a clear, non-negotiable, universally understood trigger word. And that trigger is aircraft equals land now. This is a stop word. It demands immediate, non-debatable action from the pilot, no matter what they're filming or how close they are to getting the shot. There is no, wait 5 seconds, I'm almost there. If the VO calls it, the drone comes down. Immediately.
I have to wonder, is there ever a scenario, maybe a truly critical life safety moment, where a pilot might be tempted to delay that land now call, thinking they can grab just one more piece of data? That temptation must be huge.
It is. It's the ultimate test of professionalism, but the answer has to remain no. You counter that temptation by understanding the consequence. If that pilot hesitates and causes a collision, they don't just lose their drone. They ground the entire emergency air fleet. They stop all rescues, including the one they were trying to help. So the rule is rigid precisely because the consequences of hesitating are just catastrophic. And beyond that, professional teams, they just avoid operating near obvious helicopter work zones in the first place. Hospitals, major river corridors, staging areas. You just have to assume those areas are dynamic, low-altitude, high-speed manned aircraft corridors.
Okay, pivoting from the sky to the ground. Let's address the dynamic human element. Floods attract crowds, right? You've got legitimate volunteers, concerned residents, media, and just onlookers. And all that chaos just amplifies the unpredictability of how people move. This creates a hazard that the sources call crowd creep.
Crowd creep is a huge and often overlooked risk, both operationally and from a regulatory standpoint. The source material is really clear that a group of volunteers working near a sandbag line, functionally, that's an open-air assembly. Which means if you're in Canada, you have to maintain 30 meters of separation. In the US, specific category requirements kick in. Operationally, people just drift toward the action. A volunteer takes a break, a dog walker cuts through a closed lane. It's constant.
So how does a professional team manage a safety perimeter when the ground risk is basically a moving target?
You have to establish an owned ground boundary immediately. And it's not just a physical barrier like cones or tape. It's about assigning one crew member, usually the VO, to own the perimeter watch in addition to the airspace. You have to treat the area outside your perimeter as if it's hostile and unpredictable. We advise flying with a strategy of standoff and oblique angles. Use your drone zoom from a safe distance. You never chase those dramatic overhead shots near crowds. The footage is never worth the risk of injuring a member of the public.
So you're building a safety buffer. A failure bubble that is explicitly reserved for when things go wrong.
Precisely. We call it the contingency buffer. You assume, right from the planning phase, that a wind spike or a momentary GPS failure could cause an involuntary drift. That entire failure bubble must be buffered away from all people and critical infrastructure. And the explicit stop work trigger has to be briefed. If any person enters the defined contingency buffer, we immediately reposition or stop the flight and land. And this has to be enforced with zero exception. You do not negotiate with physics when a projectile is overhead.
Now let's shift to the environment itself, because in a flood, it feels like the landscape is actively trying to undermine your technology. Water is beautiful, sure, but it's an absolute enemy of predictable drone performance.
It really is. Let's start with that invisible enemy. Wind and gusts, especially around these large bodies of moving water. Open water provides absolutely no windbreak. And worse, channels like river corridors or the gaps between bridges. They create these dramatic changes in airflow. You can get the Venturi effect, where wind speed just accelerates suddenly through a choke point. Or you can get rotor-like turbulence from buildings near the water's edge. This causes sudden, high-energy yaw, roll, and pitch changes that can totally overwhelm the flight controller.
And the operational implication of that?
Your power demands spike instantly. Your batteries drain way faster than you anticipated. So mitigations have to include setting and strictly adhering to hard, conservative wind limits, often way below the drone's stated maximum. And critically, you have to plan your flight path so that if the wind spikes, it pushes your aircraft toward your controlled landing zone, not toward roads or power lines. This just forces much shorter sorties and much more conservative battery minimums.
I find this idea of overwater sensor weirdness just fascinating. What exactly is happening when the drone's visual positioning system tries to orient itself over water?
So the VPU, it relies on textural features, small objects, shadows, lines, contrasts, to gauge its position and stay stable. Water, especially calm or swiftly moving water, is a reflective, low-texture environment. The VPU system gets confused, it just lacks reliable features to lock onto. This results in the drone wandering or having inconsistent braking or what looks like a positional drift even when the sticks are centered. The drone basically starts flying this chaotic pattern based on bad data.
So the very automation that gives pilots confidence on dry land becomes a liability over a floodplain.
It demands vigilance. The key mitigation is to fly higher, maintain your legal margin, and prioritize your manual flight competence over blind faith in GPS or VPU. You have to avoid those seductive cinematic skim passes. They look great, but they offer zero margin for error. If you're over water, you should be relying heavily on your altitude and your lateral separation, not on the drone's fancy sensors.
And we can't forget the silent threat, unseen obstacles, especially wires.
Wires are the classic mission killer, and flood conditions just make the visibility problem worse. They become nearly invisible against reflective water or a glaring sky. Floods also introduce sagging lines, damaged poles, and temporary equipment cranes, barricades that are not marked on any map. Mitigation requires an explicit, documented site scan for wire corridors before you fly. You look for the poles, the transmission towers, the shadows, the wires cast.
What's the VO's role in managing that wire risk?
The VO has to maintain that awareness of lateral separation and altitude, and they must use the clear call-out protocol. Wires 12 o'clock high, or obstacle 3 o'clock, temporary fence. And the pilot has to repeat the call to confirm they heard it and they're aware. We never, ever encourage threading the needle near known wire corridors. The risk is just way too high for what you gain.
It sounds counterintuitive, but most drone incidents, according to these safety reports, they don't happen high in the air. They happen on the ground during launch and landing. The environment is muddy, slippery.
Absolutely. Ground discipline is paramount, and it's often the first casualty when the operational tempo gets high. A simple slip on a muddy bank or rushing the takeoff procedure leads to bad inputs, damaged props, or worse, a physical injury to a crew member. The mitigation is simple. Pick a stable, no-traffic launch zone. Use a landing pad, even if it's just a piece of plywood, to keep mud out of the motors.
And what about the human factor during those critical phases?
You have to enforce the sterile cockpit rule for takeoff and landing. That means no non-essential chatter, no new tasks, no radio calls with incident command. All focuses on the aircraft. Wet hands, cold fingers, rushed procedures. It's a recipe for catastrophic inputs during the most complex phase of flight.
And then there's task saturation and crew fatigue, that insidious, slow burn of nonstop response.
Exactly. If the pilot is trying to answer the incident commander's radio, looking at the telemetry, adjusting the camera, and tracking the weather, they are task saturated. And that's when sloppy checks happen. Pre-flight checklists get skipped. Vital VO callouts get missed. Being wet, cold, and running on high adrenaline just accelerates this decline. It leads to short tempers and bad judgment, like agreeing to just one more quick shot when the weather is clearly turning for the worse.
So structure is really the only defense against that cognitive collapse.
You have to implement a single point of contact, and that's the mission lead. Their job is to queue up all external requests and protect the pilot from that chaos. You also need a mandatory rotation plan for the VO and pilot shorter sorties, dedicated breaks to warm up, and a mandatory 30-minute rotation out of the immediate stress. And the crew has to be empowered to enforce those safety stop words. Hold, abort, land now. This structural discipline is what prevents that mission creep that leads to critical errors.
That is a perfect transition. We've established that the hazards are just overwhelming for one person. So now we have to address the human element, the crew structure that ensures safety and efficiency. The source material offers this great professional mantra. One person flies. One person watches the sky and crowd. One person turns data into decisions.
And that mantra, it perfectly defines the necessary division of labor. In this high-stress environment, the operation is only as strong as its weakest link, and that weakest link is invariably an overloaded solo pilot trying to manage everything at once. Professionals know the mission is just too complex for one set of hands and eyes.
Let's break down the required crew sizes then, scaled to the complexity of the task, starting with the bare minimum.
Okay, the minimum safe crew is 2 people. The remote pilot in command, or RPIC, and the visual observer, the VO. This setup is really only suitable for the lowest complexity simple recon in a contained, non-crowded area with clear airspace. But the hard truth is, in an active flood zone, this crew size is inherently fragile. If the pilot gets distracted by a radio call from the IC, the VO is now suddenly a solo operator for both the sky and the ground, and that's a recipe for task saturation.
So the standard professional build for flood work is going to be larger.
Oh, absolutely. The standard flood crew is 3 to 5 people. This crew introduces the critical role of the mission lead, or IC liaison, who protects the pilot. And usually you'll have a dedicated data manager or payload operator. This crew size is really the sweet spot for continuous ops, complex mapping, and achieving those quick data deliverables. It proactively manages the 3 main failure points: airspace conflict, task saturation, and unusable data.
And when the operation scales up to support, say, a major regional disaster.
Then you need the full capability team. We're talking 6 to 10 plus people. This is essential for continuous 247 operations that are feeding directly into a command post or an EOC. Here, you add hyper-specialized roles: a dedicated airspace lead, a GIS specialist, logistics staff just for battery management, and a full-time safety officer. This reflects the scale you need for multi-day endurance missions that demand near real-time intelligence.
It's not just about filling chairs, though. It's about a rigid specialization. Let's detail the functions of those core roles. Let's start with the mission lead, the operational hinge.
Right. Their core purpose is strategic alignment. They have to plug into the incident command structure immediately. They need to find out who owns air operations, the air boss, and understand the incident priorities. Is it life safety, property protection? And critically, the mission lead must translate those needs into a defined mission output before the drone ever takes off. So they'll say, "We are delivering a route status pack for Sector B." This discipline prevents mission creep, and its critical failure is letting the pilot get pulled into project management, which just destroys their focus.
Okay, next up, the RPIC, the pilot, the hands and brain of the operation.
Their job is simple: fly safely, legally, and smoothly. That's it. They have to ruthlessly refuse task overload, often by just saying, "Check with the mission lead." They maintain a sterile cockpit during those critical phases: takeoff, landing, low-altitude maneuvering. And a professional habit for flood work is always flying standoff first. You leverage your optical zoom from a safe altitude rather than chasing that risky low pass over a washout. Safety over aesthetics.
And the visual observer, the VO, who we've called the Guardian.
The VO's sole purpose is to protect the pilot from surprises from the air or from the ground. This demands unblinking 360-degree scan discipline. We have to fight the human tendency to stare at the screen. In a flood, everyone wants to look at the water, but the VO has to keep their eyes up and out, actively scanning, and their authority must be absolute. When they say SOP, the operation stops. No questions asked.
The payload operator, or camera director, the value engine that turns flying into actual intelligence.
This person translates the mission lead's objectives into a coherent capture plan. They make sure the data being captured directly serves the deliverable. They manage the camera moves, calling them clearly so the pilot can focus on flying. Hold position. We need a 30-second zoom on the culvert. They protect data quality, ensuring stable horizons and avoiding those jerky pans that are useless for analysis later. They're also responsible for knowing the limits of specialized payloads, like how thermal sensors lose effectiveness over wet, reflective surfaces.
And finally, the dedicated safety officer. You said they're the gatekeeper.
They are the one person whose job is solely to slow the team down and look for latent risk. They handle site safety selection stable ground only, avoiding active vehicle lanes. They're the final authority on weather limits. They enforce PPE usage. They enforce mandatory breaks for the crew. Their core habit is to be the boring, meticulous person who keeps everyone alive, and they have to be empowered to use that stop work authority.
So we have this highly specialized team. But how do they ensure that dynamic, living list of hazards is actively monitored and updated throughout the mission?
The professional method is a simple, repeatable system we call the hazard update loop. It's a formalized communication structure that makes sure situational awareness is shared and constantly refreshed.
Okay, let's start with the pre-mission briefing.
Before any launch, you hold the pre-brief. It's a short 2 to 5 minute huddle. You cover the mission goal, the absolute geographic boundaries, known hazards, the agreed-upon stop work triggers, and explicit role ownership. VO, you own the air and the south crowd boundary. This ensures everyone starts on the same page.
And then during the flight itself, you employ in-flight micro-briefs.
This is the pulse of the operation. Every 3 to 5 minutes, or whenever you move to a new sector, the mission lead or the pilot initiates a quick check. Any change in manned aircraft, any change in crowd density, any change in wind. This forces the crew to break concentration from the immediate task and actively scan their assigned sectors. It fights that cognitive tunneling.
And the standardized call-out protocol is how everyone talks to each other under stress.
Exactly. Ambiguity kills in these situations. Everyone must use the exact same pre-agreed language. Aircraft land now. Crowd breach hold. Wind spike return. This structure trains the team to react instantly without having to process complex descriptions.
Finally, the change trigger rule, which mandates a full stop and review.
You pause the operation and you conduct a mandatory rebrief whenever a core variable shifts significantly. This could be the weather shifting, moving your launch location, an increase in crowd density, or even just switching tasks from video to mapping. This forces the team to reassess their flight geometry and safety buffer under the new conditions, rather than just assuming the old plan is still good.
We've established how to fly safely and structurally. Now let's pivot to the product. If the customer isn't paying for skillful flying, what are they buying? They're buying actionable answers that immediately inform emergency management decisions.
That's the high-value pivot point. A flight is only successful if the data can be translated instantly into a decision. Close this bridge, send the rescue boat here, or divert crews away from that unstable structure. The professional drone team is an intelligence provider, not a video production crew.
The sources organize the utility of drone data into 5 critical buckets, each serving a different customer. Let's start with the fastest value, situational awareness.
Situational awareness is that immediate, what do things look like right now package. It's the live video feed, a quick point of interest list with GPS coordinates, and rapidly geotagged photos of major issues. The customer is usually the incident command or the EOC. They use this to prioritize life safety missions and allocate resources. The key here is speed delivery within minutes.
Next, flood extent and change detection. This sounds like it requires more spatial analysis.
It does. This moves beyond just looking. It's systematic mapping of the water's edge, using persistent features as reference points. This is what public works and emergency management use to determine evacuation zones or allocate sandbagging efforts. The deliverable is a quick-stitched orthomosaic map or annotated screenshots, often required within 30 to 90 minutes of the flight to be immediately useful.
Access routes and transportation. That's crucial for first responders, right?
Absolutely. This is all about the operability of ground assets. You're capturing bridge approaches, the severity of washouts, debris fields, blocking routes. This data prevents fire and EMS crews from getting stranded or wasting critical time. The deliverable has to be fast. A route status pack photos, short notes, GIS pins delivered within 15 to 45 minutes of landing.
And then infrastructure condition.
Yeah.
The long-term, high-cost bucket.
Engineers, utilities, and insurance assessors rely on this. You are looking for those secondary failures. Erosion, new bridge foundations, damage to culverts, inundation at utility substations. The deliverable is a structured damage evidence set that must provide context, proof, and reference. This feeds into long-term remediation planning.
And finally, life safety support.
This is direct search and rescue support, and it only happens when you are explicitly tasked and coordinated with SAR teams. It involves systematic shoreline sweeps, monitoring search lanes, or using thermal imaging with careful caveats about its limitations over water. And the deliverable here is instantaneous. Precise coordinate callouts over the radio or an immediate stream to the command vehicle.
So the difference between a good team and a great one isn't the quality of the raw footage, but the speed and format of the delivered intelligence. And professionals use what the sources call a 3-layer delivery strategy.
That's right. They don't make the customer wait for a final report. Layer 1 is immediate value, delivered in 0 to 30 minutes. This is the high-velocity trust builder. As soon as the drone lands, you are physically handing over or securely transferring the top 5 most critical findings. This includes the live feed archive, 5 to 10 key labeled images, and a simple POI list with coordinates. Getting this quick, tangible product into the IC's hands creates immediate trust and validates the whole operation.
Okay, layer 2 is the quick turn analysis, which is 30 to 120 minutes.
This is where the synthesis happens. You deliver annotated images with clear arrows, circles, and text notes, and a sector pack as a PDF or in a shared cloud folder. This pack includes map screenshots with POIs layered on top and a short summary page detailing the severity of the findings. This is the package that staff in the EOC can use for their immediate shift briefings.
And layer 3, same day, next day, so 4 to 24 hours.
This is the comprehensive archival package. The full high-res orthomosaic map, structured engineering reports, and the clean archive of all raw data. And the role of the data manager is vital here because they ensure every piece of evidence meets that triple standard. Context, where is it? Proof, the clear image, and reference, a shot showing its scale. If your data is defensible, it means it can survive a legal challenge or a detailed engineering review.
This is a high-risk area. Flood response is sensitive. The data often includes vulnerable moments, addresses, critical infrastructure.
Yep.
It's legally and ethically charged.
It really is, and given the urgency, privacy risks often slide. The big ones are capturing faces of evacuees, clear license plates, or detailed views of people inside their homes. Regulatory bodies like Transport Canada and the FAA stress that the operator is responsible for personal information collection. So professionals must limit that collection to the absolute mission requirement and de-identify the data-blurring plates and faces before sharing it outside the immediate incident team. The mission is to capture structural failure, not private life.
And when data is being shared rapidly across different agencies, fire, police, public works, how do we mitigate the cybersecurity risk?
Well, the field environment is often where basic cyber hygiene fails. Common failure points are sharing data via personal, unencrypted cloud services, using unencrypted SD cards, or working on unsecured devices. Professionals have to adopt the cyber-mature mindset of critical infrastructure protection.
So what are the baseline controls that should be non-negotiable for a professional team?
First, multi-factor authentication, MFA, on all accounts, especially cloud storage. Second, enforce encryption. Full disk encryption on field laptops and encryption on all removable storage. Third, use least privilege access. Only the necessary personnel get the data they need, no sharing raw sensitive footage broadly. The professional goal is to share intentionally, not casually, often relying on established agency servers, not consumer cloud links.
We have to move into the regulatory framework because this idea that emergency equals exemption is a critical and dangerous fallacy. Compliance is the foundation of trust, and the sources detail some really distinct differences between Canada and the U.S.
Understanding these two frameworks is non-negotiable, especially as cross-border response efforts become more common. The fundamental safety risk flying new people is handled through two very different regulatory philosophies, which can often trip up pilots used to only one system.
Okay, let's start with Canada. Their focus seems heavily weighted toward horizontal separation.
That's the key differentiator. Canada's max altitude is a firm 122 meters or 400 feet AGL. But the regulation's primary focus is on horizontal distance from people. For basic operations, you must maintain more than 30 meters horizontally from any bystander. And a bystander is any non-participating person.
And if you scale up the drone size,
if you're operating a medium RPAS, that separation distance jumps significantly to 152.4 meters. If your mission requires flying closer than 30 meters, or crucially directly over people, you immediately move into advanced operations. This requires the pilot to hold a specific advanced operations certificate, use a declared compliant drone, and operate under detailed procedures. The Canadian regulatory mindset is distance first, complexity second.
Now, compare that to the U.S. under FAA Part 107 Subpart D.
The U.S. system is structured around categories which are primary. Operations over human beings are permitted only if the aircraft in the operation meet one of four specific categories, and those categories are determined by the weight and the tested impact energy of the aircraft. It's less about a blanket distance and more about proving the drone poses a minimal kinetic threat if it fails.
Can you just quickly break down those categories for us?
Sure. Think of it this way. Category 1 is for extremely light drones. The rule assumes if it falls, the injury is minimal. Category 2 has weight and kinetic energy limits, often requiring prop guards or similar protections. Category 3 allows for heavier drones, but they have to use a means of limiting injury, like a parachute system with demonstrated reliability. And Category 4 requires a full FAA airworthiness certificate, treating the drone much like a small manned aircraft. The crucial point is you have to know your drone's category and fly within those strict limits.
And what about operating over crowds, like that volunteer sandbagging line we talked about earlier?
In the U.S., sustained flight over open-air assemblies is restricted unless specific requirements tied to remote ID and the category are satisfied. The FAA just doesn't want you loitering over an unpredictable crowd, especially if you haven't taken steps to limit the drone's impact energy. If you can't maintain separation, you need the right tech and the right clearance.
When a disaster hits, the sky changes instantly. What are the specific emergency restrictions drone pilots have to monitor?
In Canada, if a public authority establishes an emergency security perimeter, a defined, controlled zone around the disaster, you cannot operate over or within it, full stop. The only very narrow exception is if you are operating in service of a public authority and your operation is explicitly coordinated with them. You cannot freelance into an active emergency zone.
And for the U.S., the temporary flight restriction, or TFR?
TFRs are the defining feature of U.S. disaster airspace. Disasters often trigger instantaneous TFRs. All operators are obligated to check NOTAMs and TFR databases immediately before launching. Ignorance of a TFR is not a defense. Flying into one, especially a disaster TFR, will result in immediate enforcement and the grounding of your entire operation, even if you're there to help. The principle is simple. The sky is closed until the authority says it is open, or you have an explicit waiver.
Let's talk about a common trap that affects both countries, the moving vehicle trap. Floods often leave bridges marginally open, and you need to inspect them while they're in use.
In both regulatory environments, sustained flight over moving vehicles requires extremely strict conditions. In the U.S., this means meeting one of the Part 107 categories for flight over people. In Canada, you're still bound by the bystander distance rules. The professional operational reality is that safely inspecting active transport corridors often means coordinating a temporary traffic stop. You shut the road down briefly rather than trying to thread the needle over traffic. If you can't guarantee separation from the vehicle contingency path, you just can't fly.
So professionals don't just plan a flight path, they design a safety bubble. And they use a structured mental model, which is often referenced in the Canada AIM, that requires defining 3 distinct volumes of space.
Exactly. This is where we separate the serious professional from the hobbyist who just uses the geofence feature. First, you have the operational volume. This is the precise, often small airspace you intend to fly in to get the job done, your planned path. Second, and this is the critical one, the contingency volume. This is the buffer. It's the maximum space the drone could go if something fails. A strong wind spike, a lost link. You have to conservatively estimate this volume based on the drone's performance and the weather forecast.
And the third piece.
Third is the ground risk buffer. This is the non-negotiable margin of safety protecting people on the ground. It's the required legal separation, say 30 meters in Canada, that must always exist between the outer edge of your contingency volume and the nearest bystander.
So the ground risk buffer is the safety line that even your worst case failure scenario cannot cross. That is a fundamentally different way of planning.
It is the professional mental model. Look at the case file example. You plan a flight path, your operational volume, 35 meters from a volunteer staging area. That's legally compliant for a small drone in Canada. However, you know a severe downburst could push the drone 20 meters off course instantly. If that happens, your contingency volume now extends to just 15 meters from the bystanders, which means your plan is structurally weak because you failed to maintain the required 30-meter separation under a foreseeable failure. The model demands that you risk the drone, not the people, by designing your flight geography around the worst case, not the best case scenario.
We've covered the discipline of safe flying and the regulatory floor. Now let's talk about the business end of this. The habits we discuss next are what turn a successful single flight into being the go-to team for your city, your utility company, or a major agency. You're moving from a single success to institutional trust.
This transition is purely about predictability and impact. To become a repeat hire professional, you have to master the art of reducing chaos for your customer and delivering maximum actionable clarity with zero operational drama.
Customers in high-stress environments don't grade drone teams on artistic merit. They grade them on a specific scorecard that defines competence under duress.
That's right. The sources identify 7 critical dimensions that an emergency manager uses to silently score your performance. Number 1, safety and professionalism. This is the non-negotiable floor. Did you interfere with manned aircraft? Did you fly into a TFR? A single failure here results in a permanent blacklist.
Number 2, speed to first value.
This is the immediate trust score. How fast did you deliver that Layer 1 intelligence? Did the IC have 5 labeled images in their hand in 20 minutes, or did they have to wait 3 hours? You win this by delivering fast, useful packets continuously.
Number 3, quality of intelligence.
Right, and this is more than just video quality. Were your findings clear, correctly geotagged, and relevant to the decision they needed to make? Can they tell the depth of the water from your evidence?
Number 4, reliability and predictability.
Did you show up prepared and self-sufficient? Did you have a rotation plan for batteries and crew? The professional team is low maintenance, predictable, and self-sufficient. They don't become a burden.
Number 5, Communication under stress.
Calm, brief, and accurate, no hype, no guessing. You communicate clear updates on your operational status, battery life, and critically, what intelligence you expect to deliver and when. You manage expectations.
Number 6, data management and defensibility.
Is the data organized, time-stamped, and easy to find? Was that context-proof reference structure maintained so the data holds up later for insurance claims or engineering reports?
This is huge.
And finally, number 7, fit with the team.
The human element. Were you humble, helpful, and easy to integrate? Did you reduce the operational complexity for the commander, or did you create friction? People remember the teams that reduce their stress. That's what earns the next contract.
Let's get into the practical habits, the gold nuggets, that define the expert team on the ground. The first, and I would argue most important, habit is to clarify the mission before you even fly. You do this by asking a single, simple, profound question of the incident commander. What decision are you trying to make with my data?
You're not asking for a shot list. You're focusing on the required outcome.
Exactly. You are linking your data to their decision cycle. Are they trying to decide if they can send a swift water rescue team? Then you capture flow rate and debris fields. You then ruthlessly tailor your deliverable to support that immediate decision. Second, deliver small, useful chunks continuously. That drip feed of actionable intelligence builds trust much faster than waiting for one big report.
Professionals also think like supervisors, not videographers.
They speak in outcomes, not drone jargon. Instead of saying, we'll fly a grid mission, they say, we will deliver a flood extent map and a route status pack in 60 minutes. They don't just deliver raw images. They deliver a route status pack that recommends an action. Recommend closing Route A. Route B is clear. They become part of the solution.
And that element of honesty about what they can't confirm is also key.
Vital for long-term credibility. You must provide clear confidence levels for your findings. Confirmed, likely, or unconfirmed. For example, we observed the water level rising, but we couldn't confirm structural integrity due to the glare. Honesty builds trust. Never oversell the capabilities of your sensors.
We've stressed safety throughout, but let's explicitly list the mistakes that will guarantee you get blacklisted by every agency. The career-ending list.
Number 1, interfering with manned aircraft. This is the safety failure that grounds air operations, wastes thousands of dollars, and puts lives at risk. It is an instant, non-debatable failure.
Number 2, flying where your contingency path puts crowds at risk.
If people are under your contingency path, you reposition or you stop. You never negotiate with physics, and you never rely on people staying put. This includes launching from unstable banks or near active vehicle lanes.
Number 3, the social media trap.
This is a massive trust issue. Never post flood drama clips for personal attention, especially if they capture identifiable evacuees or private homes. Transport Canada and FEMA have extremely clear policies on this, and breaching that trust will get you blacklisted instantly. And finally, the ultimate data management failure. Never deliver 400 unlabeled, unsummarized files. If the customer has to become an archaeologist to dig through your digital mess to find the one piece of useful intelligence, they will hire the team that makes it easy next time.
This has been a necessary and deeply focused deep dive into the discipline, structure, and regulation required to operate professionally in this high-consequence environment. Let's quickly summarize the core knowledge nuggets we extracted for you today.
First, the absolute necessity of a specialized, dedicated airspace watch the visual observer, and that immediate, non-negotiable land now trigger the instant a manned aircraft is spotted. That has to be the primary focus of safety.
Second, the power of a specialized crew structure mission lead, RPIC, VO, data manager, to handle task saturation. In a flood, the chaos will overwhelm a two-person crew. Order is only maintained through defined roles.
And third, the value of layered defensible data. You have to deliver fast answers in immediate chunks, making sure every finding provides context, proof, and reference. You have to transform raw footage into actionable intelligence that drives a decision.
Now, for the final provocative thought we'll leave you with, something to mull over on your own. The most important measure of success in this high-consequence environment is not whether the drone captured the perfect image, but whether your entire operation was functionally invisible to the responders you were supporting.
Did you integrate so seamlessly that your data was actionable, your safety protocols protected the most vulnerable, and you successfully prevented your own mission from becoming the second emergency that Incident Command had to manage? If you operated like a ghost, adding immense value without friction, you succeeded. And this underscores the flood response prime directive. Risk the drone, not the people. That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above. Go beyond. Get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.